So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is another new map and another replay that was sent to me by Eclipse actually, and he's really been spoiling me lately with all the stuff that he's been sending, and I'm very grateful for that. And this is a new map which I don't think we should encounter any of the recent crashing issues that I've been having with some of the new maps on, because there isn't a great deal of specific assets on this map which I think would cause a crash. There's a couple of small villages here, but that certainly shouldn't make too much of a difference, because having spoken to Sin of the Dark Cloud about it, maps like the Witch King's Sanctum, at least the previous version of it, by now I believe it's been fixed and I should be able to show it. The reason why they were crashing was because there was so many custom assets on the map that the game sort of shat itself basically, and would crash a lot. So hopefully that isn't going to be the case with this one. And hopefully it won't be the case moving forwards either with some of the more reasonably constructed ones, as well as some of the edited ones, of course. But this one is the ENEDWAITH villages, and just having a little cursory glance at the map, a lot of cliffs, a lot of terrain. Obviously the attack's going to have to go uphill pretty much all the way through all of the defenders' defences. A couple of villages that the defenders can hold on to as well. A lot of sort of narrower choke points that the attacks will have to push through, as well as some more wider spaces which both sides can take potential advantage of. We'll start off with the attackers starting off down in the looks to be sort of the wasteland portion of ENEDWAITH itself. There's a lot of ways up onto the higher portion where the villages are. We shall start off over here with just a very small section of Engswix's army. He's playing as Rudauer. His general is the Franadine nobles, which is not too surprising on a map like this, because while it is a siege, technically speaking, with the defenders all up in very nice positions, there are wider open spaces that they will have to deal with, as well as two very cavalry focused two factions on the defence which can be very heavy cavalry focused, so it makes sense that Rudauer would try to counteract that a little bit, I think. But the rest of Rudauer's army is likely made up of a lot of lower tier troops like Rudauer swordsmen and clansmen to make up the bulk of the army, and then that's probably going to be accented with a lot of axe throwers and javelins. That would definitely be the best way to play Rudauer in this particular situation, I think. It is most of the time, but especially when you're on the attack alongside other factions who can perhaps fill in for some of Rudauer's deficiencies when it comes to their armour and their sort of survivability over a long period of time. Melee defense as well. Not that Isengard here, commanded by Froggy, really focused too hard on the melee defense side of things. Certainly in terms of armour though, they have a little bit more to offer than Rudauer. Looks as though the Spear Guard here have had an armour upgrade, so they should be a little bit tougher in that regard as well. Not that they'll be hugely effective at killing things, but like I said, there could be a good deal of cavalry in the defensive armies, so spears like this will be useful. Most of the Isengard army appears to be hidden as well though, here on the barren scab of Middle-earth, really, ENEDWAITH is, along with the Dead Marshes and the Brown Lands. We have some Trolls of the White Hand back here, and then the General's Bodyguard, I believe, nothing too surprising about it being the Nazkai either. While the Champions of the White Hand could be useful as well, you do need a bit of quality in terms of the infantry in this sort of situation to really give yourself a leg up there. Just standard infantry won't really cut the mustard. Then we have HRE, Mini 4 Ninja, who's going to be playing as the Orcs to Misty Mountains. He has brought two mangonels, so we've seen in recent times on Lynn here and now on this map, the Misty Mountains bring two pieces of artillery. This time it's the same one though. The mangonel could be very useful in this map actually, to really break up the initial defences of the defenders and sort of make some gaps, because of course if the attackers can wash over the defenders quickly, that can take away their defensive advantage very fast. But it is still a big investment to bring two mangonels, and of course the mangonel is quite an unpredictable beast indeed. The Cave Troll Drummers are kind of a must when you go heavy into the mangonel as well, because obviously you could end up routing your own men with the Misty Mountains morale being what it is. And then also the Blackback Mountain Berserkers, the General's Bodyguard, takes away the ability to hide when you put the General in it, but the Blackback's job really is to get into melee and just tear things up. Might make them a little bit more vulnerable to archers, but we shall see. And then the final army you can see here is Inarius, played by Mordor. Mordor played by Inarius. Get my words in the right order. We have some Olakai here in the trees. We also have the General's Bodyguard, which is going to be some Temple Guard, so armour-piercing archers I think are going to be a very good choice, especially considering the faction which is on this side of things. And then some Morannon Halberds, which will also be a good choice for the AP. And then the rest of Mordor's army, just like the other orcs and evil men here, are going to be hidden. Now we shall go through the defenders, starting off with Viper Action playing as Gondor, who's going to be defending the further forward of the two sections of the village. I think there's actually three, but this is definitely the furthest forward. And he has got some upgraded Gondor infantry, only the first level of armour upgrades, those are not going all in on that. Of course, he should have a decent budget to play with, considering they are outnumbered, but maybe going for some slightly higher tier options. Gondor certainly have a lot of options throughout their entire roster, but especially with their infantry. Some civilians just to get in the way. we also have some Gondor Archers who do not have any armour upgrades actually, which is an interesting choice, just the mail. They'll still be decent in a skirmish fight, and it's not like they're going up against any factions which are super good in terms of their archers, but the armour upgrade certainly would have given them even more of an advantage there. Unupgraded Axemen of Lasarnak as well. You don't actually get to see this an awful lot when you see their sort of scale mail armour as opposed to the plate that they get when they're upgraded, because that is a big advantage the Axemen of Lasarnak have. They're not actually that much better than, well, they are basically the same as stuff like Rudour Axemen and sort of Riddermark Axemen from Rohan. But upgrading the armour twice makes them significantly tankier than those units, which is important for a unit of Axemen usually. But you can still save a bit of money and get a bit of AP and sort of more of an aggressive focused infantry unit if you do bring them as Gondor. Some Pelargir Marines, Javelins of course, going to be very important to try and hold down those lines and really do some damage quickly. Of course the mighty Fountain Guard, you know, they're such a good unit to have at the heart of Gondor. Like I said a few times before, on 0.97 they're not as reliant on the Fountain Guard as they used to be, but they're still so good that it's hard to justify not bringing them, especially when you're on the defence like this and you know that the enemy will have to come towards you. Some fully upgraded Gondor infantry here, the full plate in effect there, so he has upgraded some of his Gondor infantry to the max. Some Citadel Guard. Here we have some upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak as well, so this is the fully upgraded variant of them. They'll be significantly tankier for the reasons that I outlined. And I think the rest of his army is actually up on this cliff, so that's the initial force, and then more of his elites are up here of course because there is a cliff here that the enemies will have to go near just to get up to the next layer, so it's a good choice to fortify this area. Some more Pelargir Marines. Marksmen of Caer Andros, not only better at range but much better in melee than the standard Gondor Archers. Some Fountain Guard and some Citadel Guard, AP Spears. Some Guards of Osgiliath, a catapult, very nastily positioned up here as well. And then some Raven Helms, some heavy swordsmen of course, and then the General's Bodyguard going to be the Nimlothian Honour Guard. A good choice to my mind. And then we move on to Dol Amroth, who's going to be played by Dollar Elf. So he's got some dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan who have been surprisingly effective actually in the recent replays I've seen them in. And I say that because most of the time when I play in games sort of with, as, or against Dol Amroth, they've never tended to be amazing. But in the replays I've seen, they have definitely proven to be a very good sense to the Dol Amroth line. That doesn't, from a stats perspective, it doesn't surprise me though, because they should be good at that. They inspire nearby units and they've got multiple HP as well as being very tough. They're not necessarily designed to get a lot of kills quickly, but they can be a fantastic supporting tool for the centre of the Dol Amroth line. Yeah, we'll see how well they can do here. I suppose it depends on what they face, because if they face lower tier stuff, they can carve through them and not really take too much damage. Belfast Marines are here, obviously again very similar to the Pelargir Marines really. Imrahil going to be rolling with his Haven Guard, not too surprising in a situation like this. Perithil Champions and Black Swan Renegades, so both of the upper end Dol Amroth infantry units. The armour piercing of the Mace Men and the fear and base damage that the Perithil Champions provide. We have some stakes over here guarding the way into sort of the second portion of the village. I think the rest of it is up here. Now there's some tents up here, so technically it's just the two portions of the village as I suspected, but he's got some stakes as well as some Tirithea marksmen. Not as good as the Gondorian Caer Andros ones, but they're still pretty good. Sort of on par at range, but obviously the melee prowess of the ones from Caer Andros certainly does shine through. And then the main bulk of his army, some Doran Ernil pikemen as well as some Tarnostian spearmen, some fast movers in the Perithil Riders, which could be really useful actually against some of the more lightly armoured forces from Rudour if they play their cards right. Perithil Champions and Black Swan Renegades, and then a couple of units of Doran Ernil Archers up here on the hill. And then finally, we have, of course, Eclipse, the one who sent me the battle replay, and he is going to be playing as Rohan, another faction, of course, which is very good on the heavy cavalry, but I'm actually glad that he's gone for primarily units that are on foot, because I think Rohan, you know, they deserve a chance to show that their infantry is actually pretty decent, and I hope that they will show that here, because I know they can be, much in the same way that I know the dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan can be both good and bad. The same can be said of Rohan. If they engage correctly, they can be surprisingly effective considering their cavalry focus. Riddermark Archers are very basic archers, you know, they're really just here to make up the numbers in much the same way that Evil Men Archers are, and they don't have a great deal of numbers in the unit. If you want a good foot archer, you really have to go for the Helmingas, but in a defensive situation like this, you need some form of foot archer, I think, if you're going to go for a lot of units on foot. A couple of units of Westmark infantry, which are very good as far as line infantry goes, to be honest with you. I would suggest that you look at them in a similar vein as the Serpent Guard from Harad, purely because they do lack a little something when you compare them to stuff like the Gondorian equivalents when it comes to defence. You know, their shield value is not quite as high, their armour values are certainly not quite as high, but they can do a decent amount of damage, and they can last in melee for a long time based on melee defense and damage. And in comparison to some of the more basic men-at-arms units from the other Western Kingdoms, they are fairly expensive, though, to be fair. They are slightly more expensive than standard men-at-arms units in much the same way the Serpent Guard are. Riddermark Axemen, again the sort of more entry-level Axeman unit that Rohan have, comes with all the strengths and weaknesses you would imagine. Very damaging, but don't necessarily last too long when they're in melee. Medicelt Guard, a really, really good unit of javelins. This is where the general is by the looks of things. In addition to that, they're also really good in melee and cause fear. So I'm a big fan of the Medicelt Guard. Maybe, they definitely don't have the same punch as something like the Demons of the Desert, and they lack a little bit of damage in melee in comparison to something like the Reforged from Javelins, but they're a good mix. They're a very reliable unit, I find. Eastmark Spears, very, very basic spears, but they do throw a javelin before they engage in melee. They're really bad in melee, to be fair, and their javelins are not overly damaging, but for the price you pay for them, having a volley from javelins is not a bad thing at all. Some Westmark Marshals, a really good unit of Axemen as well. They are slightly tougher in terms of armour than something like the unupgraded Balaketh Axe Guard, but they do lack a little bit in terms of defensive skill, so you have to match them up against the right opponent for them to be as effective as they can be. Shield Maidens of Rohan, as well as some Helmingas, so this is going to be Rohan's more damaging range corps, especially the Shield Maidens. They could really wreak havoc among the polearm units of Isengard and Rudauer. We have some Riddermark Skirmishers, another good choice because this will give them a real leg up in a cav engagement because they are melee cavalry in melee and javelin cavalry at range. I mean, they're not the best in terms of their stats. That sounds like an absolutely lethal combination, but the stats sort of do make it so that they won't be completely overpowering in that sort of engagement. We have some Red Shields of Erkenbrand. They're going to be here, obviously. Again, melee cavalry, bow cavalry hybrids. They're better in melee just because they have higher stats. Sons of Eorl, and then also some Arid of Alberg. So yeah, lots of cavalry, but a decent infantry corps as well, so we'll see how that goes. I will make a cut here because all of the attackers are fairly far back, and it'll take them a little while to sort of organise themselves and march up into the cliffs and into the villages here on the plains of ENEDWAITH. So I will make a cut, and I will rejoin when the battle has joined. So as you can see, a bit of an interesting decision here, as Gondor has decided to move the half of their army that they had further forwards and push them up to try and defend this choke point, which is risky. It could pay dividends for them because they could do an awful lot of damage to Mordor here if they play their cards right with their archers and their javelins they had over here, albeit only basic archers, and the Pelargir Marines are not exactly hugely damaging as far as javelins go. They will of course still inflict a pretty heavy toll if you just leave them in the sight lines of them, but still, Mordor's best bet here would definitely be to go all in and try and crack this front line quickly, because there isn't a great deal of quality on this front line, just some upgraded Gondor infantry by one level and some civilians, and I can already see here that the Olag High are making their way forward, which is the correct move, I think, because again, fully upgraded Gondor infantry, while tough, are definitely not going to be able to put up much of a fight against Olag High. You can see here the Pelargir Marines are firing away, the Gondor Archers starting to fire as well, the civilians already routing actually under the weight of this Mordor advance, albeit nothing kicking into too high a gear yet, but I do like the fact that the Mordor player here has committed his Olag High early, because I feel as though one thing that a lot of players tend to make is they tend to try and conserve too much of their resources early on in a siege like this, to try and save it for the late game, but you need to get to the late game in a good enough state to actually contribute first and foremost. It's a delicate balancing act, obviously if you put too much in, you're obviously going to be in a bit of trouble. You can see over here Riddermark Axemen and Westmark Infantry getting into position as Rudauer are going around here, another little route up and around into the hills that Rudauer are going to be taking, and there is a small token Rohan force which is going to try and stop them here. Eastmark Spearmen revealing themselves, and they are actually going to take a full charge here from the Franadine Nobles. Spearmen they may be, but they are militia spears, in much the same way the Greenway Garrison ones are, but it's still risky for the Franadine Nobles because they did take some javelin fire there from the side against the Eastmark Spears. The axes are now going to join melee as well as some Westmark infantry. It is risky this from Rohan because there is a huge cavernous hole in their line which they could use, which the Rudauer cavalry could use to get in behind them, and a few charges and the Rohirrim infantry will probably think twice about staying in melee with Rudauer, but Rudauer needs to send forward a few more units of infantry than this, I think, otherwise they're in danger of just being sent back the other way by Rohan's more professional troops. They are at least supporting them with some Dunman Hunters. Rudauer clansmen are also moving up. A lot of spears here, which is not the worst idea. Doesn't really make sense to commit your AP units too early. Both of the other defensive factions have got more armour to dig into with your axes, so trying to conserve them for later is not the worst thing you can do. Riddermark Axemen now taking over the brunt of responsibilities on the front line. But over here, we can see that Mordor, they did send forward some around halberds, I did see that, but Gondor's front line is actually still holding on. I'm actually quite surprised here. The Olag Kai, however, are going to be taking a real toll on this front line, but Axemen of Lasarnak in there, the kind of unit which trolls are not going to like to fight too much. More damage, armour piercing as well. It could get worse for them though, as the Fountain Guard start to push in. While they are a phalanx unit and trolls usually perform very well against them, the Fountain Guard aren't your average run-of-the-mill halberds. They should be able to lay down quite a lot of damage here, and so Mordor, they should still make it through here. Like, eventually Mordor will make it through just this individual wing of the Gondorian army. But will they take too much damage doing that? Forward come the Black Guard of Barad-dûr. Pretty good time to commit them, actually. I don't think there's any reinforcements, really. Well, there is a unit of Gondor infantry back here. But for the most part, Gondor are going to have to commit most of these resources forward quite quickly. There's actually some Citadel Guard here as well. So Gondor, not actually that backwards in coming forwards either. Committing forward a ton of resources here to try and pin Mordor in place. But here comes the Great Shield unit, and they're going to get through. They don't actually need to push their way through the front line because there's a big hole that they can use instead. Not exactly the best unit for dealing damage when they do flank through though. So we'll see what the Black Guard are able to accomplish here. Gondor fighting resolutely so far. Forward come the Fountain Guard, back come the civilians to patch up any holes in the Gondorian line right in and amongst these trees. These Gondor Archers are probably already cleaned up a bit. And actually Gondor, so it managed to crash again just now. It's getting ridiculous at this point. But the Mangonel was obviously the thing that caused it to crash, because as soon as that projectile landed, it crashed previously. This is a problem for the Gondorian front line though, because now that the Mangonel is in a pretty nasty position over there, it can shoot right along the line, and if it manages to land a good hit, it could send the Gondorian front line routing, or at least large portions of it. The elites like the Fountain Guard will probably still stick around, but stuff like the civilians will be long gone, and even the standard Gondor infantry probably won't want to continue to fight on. Mordor putting a lot of pressure onto this front line now though. With the support of the Misty Mountains, it could get pretty ugly, but so far, with Gondor continuing to send resources forward, this has also gotten pretty ugly for Mordor. I'm pretty sure when they looked at the deployment, they were quite fancying their chances of pushing through this area more quickly than they maybe will be able to now, with all of this range support coming down. And it is probably the narrowest choke point, which is probably why Gondor wanted to move forward and use it, because it is probably the best opportunity they had to really bottle them up, instead of letting Mordor just run rampant all over the village that's over there. You can see there's another shot coming in from the Mangonel, just about seeing the fire as it rises up over there. And there you can see big portions of the Gondorian front line now starting to rout. A unit of over 130 Gondor infantry running for the hills. They will come back, of course, but by that time it could already be far too late to actually save this front line. Citadel Guard will fight on, and the Black Guard of Barad-dûr and Sauron's will actually struggling still to push their way through these Citadel Guardsmen. Meanwhile, way on the other side of the map, we can see Rohan continuing to do some damage, some Rudar clansmen trying to push through. Again, my biggest problem with this is going to be, I'm not sure whether Rohan had the resources over here to cover every angle, but so far it does look as though they're actually managing it. These Eastmark spearmen have been isolated by a single unit of Rudar swordsmen though, which is bad for them. Obviously this is a matchup they're not going to win. They're not going to be able to beat many units in melee, to be honest with you. The Eastmark spears, maybe low tier archers that are out of ammo. But now you can see the Sons of Eor are actually going to charge uphill, which will slow them down substantially, and in the end that wasn't much of a charge at all. And now the Dunman Spearmen will be able to get a hold of them as well. But over here is where a lot of Rudar's resources have gone. The Dunman Hunters trying to get in place. You can see up there the Helmingas on the hillside as well. The Red Shields of Erkenbrand also shooting down, so a bit of a killing field this. Rudar also giving as good as they get though with their own archers, and of course Rohan don't exactly have the best armour values either, especially in comparison to the other two defending factions here. So even these basic Rudar archers are probably going to be able to make a bit of a mark here on the Rohirrim infantry, but certainly from a melee perspective here, Rohan should be cleaning up against Rudar. You can see here the Westmark Marshals coming in now, and over here the Rudar swordsmen will find themselves thoroughly outmatched. Really, really nasty. In come the Sons of Eor. The Haranadine nobles are going to have to run now. You can see there the Shield Maidens did get caught but not charged, so they should be able to get out of there without too much damage. The Riddermark skirmishers also throwing some javelins in as Rudar continue to try and push through. Maybe this is too steep to traverse and that's why they're having to go around both sides. It makes sense because the middle is wide open, so if they could get up that bank they probably would be doing so. Helmingas firing from on high as well, significantly better damage than the Riddermark archers as well. And they're going to be firing into Rudar as they continue to move forward. Decent in melee as well, so when the time comes that they need some extra infantry, you could certainly stand to do worse. But here with all of these extra numbers now flooding forward, I think the time for Rohan to try and hold this position is pretty much up. And over here, I mean, the real advantage that Gondor had is that they were able to get into a position that was a narrower choke point. Although over here you can see the Melkor's Chosen actually did manage to spring a bit of an ambush, but now they are going to be utterly surrounded by Aeryd of Aldburg, Riddermark Skirmishers, Perithil Riders. But I mean, the Melkor's Chosen are better than all of these units in melee against other cavalry by a very significant margin. The only other unit with an anti-cavalry bonus at all is the Riddermark Skirmishers. And the Melkor's Chosen could just clean up here. If they don't let the Perithil Riders just shoot into their backs, that could be a real problem for them. You can see there the Adunheim Shadowbows have also gotten up here. Was this a deployment? They must have deployed up here, because there's no way that they would have been able to climb up that cliff. The Orc Fodder have also revealed themselves now. The Orc, the Fodder getting into melee against the Archers. So they have sprung a bit of a trap here, Mordor, and Gondor did advance forwards, let's not forget. This wasn't the deployment zone they started with, so definitely a legitimate tactic here from Mordor. And also Isengard now pushing up with some Uruk-hai pike, so certainly the front line looking a little bit less sure of itself than it was, but Gondor's still holding on. I mean, a lot of these heavily armoured troops are definitely still holding their ground, and units like the Saurons will, and even the Mangonel has not really had as much of an impact as I'm sure the attackers were hoping for here, because still, there's Minas Morgul Chosen on the front line here as well. Still, the Gondorians are holding very firm here underneath the trees in this choke point, but they have sent forward a lot of resources to do this. We'll see if it proves to be worthwhile in the long run. He has also got some support from his allies as well in terms of that cavalry, otherwise Mordor's Melkor's Chosen could have been absolutely lethal. We shall see if that continues. Tarnostian spearmen guarding this particular approach as Isengard and the Misty Mountains prepare their own assault through the middle. There's actually two pathways they could take. Each army could take just the one pathway each, or they could double up on a single pathway. Probably better to go after Rohan, to be honest with you. Rohan already have their resources pretty stretched, what with Rudauer committing their entire army to this section over here. There's now Cranodyne pikes as well moving forward, so a lot of pikes and spears on the part of Rudauer here. The Riddermark Skirmishers also charging in. The Attenmore's Troll Hunters are here. They've already taken a lot of damage, presumably from the archers on the cliffs, which is a good thing for Rohan, because obviously heavily armoured spearmen, javelin hybrids is really the sort of thing they want to be avoiding at all costs. These shield maidens, hard to tell how much damage they've actually been able to do. Excuse me. But certainly, you can see now that Rudauer, just through sheer weight of numbers, are pushing back their fellow men of northern descent. Up there you can see more Rohirrim, however, up on the cliffs, the Helmingast still doing their thing. This is a problem though, because as Rudauer continue to push forward, the Misty Mountains and Isengard can honestly probably get away with waiting for some support to come from this angle, and then they can attack, and it will make Rohan and Dol Amrot's lives a lot harder to be sure. Or they could move forward earlier. You can see here Goblin Archers starting to push forward, Tarnostian Spears, Doran Ernal Archers up on the cliffside here trying to do some damage, and they are actually going after some of the Uruk-hai infantry and Dunlending veterans of Isengard over there. Better to go after them than the Goblin Archers, of course, trying to whittle away at the attackers' melee powers. And the Doran Ernal Archers, obviously, a very general purpose archer at best. Meanwhile, what have we got going on over here? Still the Gondorians hold, but now we've got yet another unit of Trolls going forward. So Trolls to the White Hand, a lot of the attackers, the attackers have thrown a lot at this choke point though. So it's hard to tell whether this has been worth it. I mean, now you can see the Melkor's Chosen are coming down here. The Melkor's Chosen have really torn the cavalry asunder up here, which is the danger. I mean, all of that cavalry, it was horse archers, javelin cav, just lancers as well. The Riddermark Skirmishers are good against cavalry, but it's a completely different league. The Melkor's Chosen are one of the best anti-cavalry cavalry units in the entire game, and I think they just proved it there alongside the Nazgul here. Mordor have taken damage though. They are going to need the continued support of their allies if they're going to continue to push through, but on the two flanks the attackers are now making progress. Some Orc Javelins are in here as well. The Fountain Guard finally breaking. It takes a lot to break the Fountain Guard, but utterly surrounded and then a charge from the Melkor's Chosen is certainly something that will make even the stoutest heart feel a little faint. And there you can see the Gondor infantry also being mercilessly pursued by the Trolls of the White Hand, every bit as dangerous as the Olag-hai that Gondor have already had to deal with. And this is yet more of that valuable Gondorian manpower getting squashed underfoot. So it was looking pretty good, but I would say the attackers can still count this as a decent victory here. Mordor have lost a lot, but a lot of Gondor's manpower has also gone, and I think proportionally the defenders will be feeling a little bit more bloodied by that exchange. You can see here as well, Rudauer certainly having the better end of this engagement, the attackers. I think Rohan, they just didn't have quite the same kind of terrain that Gondor had that they were able to hold on for as long as they were able to. You can see over here there's still some Westmark infantry actually left behind by the Rudauer push in many ways, still fighting hard and trying to kill as many of these men as they can. They, of course, will eventually be brought down, but Rudauer still have a pretty big army as well. Definitely going for a numbers focus here, Rudauer and Engsvich, which I definitely approve of in this situation. Rudauer can be a very awkward foe to fight when they go numbers heavy, because all they need to do is pin the defenders in with their infantry, engage the defenders' lines as perhaps they would want, and then send forward axe throwers and javelins to do some more damage. The red shields have left their position on the cliff after using all of their ammunition with their bows, and you can see here, you know, Rohan, the Riddermark skirmishers and the red shields, I think trying to cover the retreat, because I think they realise here that they're not going to be able to hold this choke point against Isengard. Rudauer are on the way. They need to reposition themselves. Dunlanding veterans charging forward, trying to get after the Riddermark Archers, but they need to be careful not to overextend here. The Dunlanders, you can see they're already being chased down by all of this cavalry, including the mighty Sons of Yor. And there's actually no anti-cavalry units up the hill yet. The Spear Guard are making their way up here slowly but surely. You can see here it's just Uruk-hai infantry and Dunlanding veterans. The Dunlanders do have an anti-cavalry bonus, but it's certainly not as significant as a spear offers. So they're just going to get pasted here on the charge. So I think seeing the opportunity there to try and go after some soft and vulnerable low-tier archers, Isengard maybe getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves, and now they're at the mercy of the Rohirrim cavalry. And some of their valuable infantry will be going down the drain. Meanwhile, over on this side as well, under the trees, pushing through. Orcs to the Misty Mountains, also Mountain Uruk host taking point, not receiving too much in the way of resistance from Dol Amroth, as they are also pulling back alongside what's left of the Rohirrim infantry, and they are going to be using the terrain to their advantage here, the defenders instead. Very much like a castle, making the attackers take the longest route through it, and all the while they're going to be taking range fire as well. So it's going to be tough on the attackers here as they move through, but they have forced the defenders to retreat, perhaps before they really wanted to, which is always a good sign when you're on the attack. If you're making the defenders do things before they're ready, then you're going to be able to clean up like this. Obviously, Mordor in particular have been able to really chase things down, and Isengard actually with their trolls and with their cavalry. They've been able to chase down some of the fleeing Gondorians that were guarding the previous choke point, and that's going to be more units they don't have to deal with later when they come to besiege the centre of this little community. Gondor infantry. Maybe it was just having the effects turned up to maximum which was causing the game to suffer in that regard, so I think I'll leave that on lowest. It's definitely not the most important thing anyway. You only really see that in action when the catapults and siege equipment are firing anyway. In come the red shields. Obviously horse archers not the best charge, but the mass will do most of the work, to be fair, on a cav charge like that, especially against poorly organised line infantry as well. So the Dunlanders not going to enjoy their time here at the having to face down the steeds of their sworn enemies. Trying to avoid the half-orc spear guard here are the Rohirrim. Interestingly enough, the red shield's kind of breaking up the charge of the Sons of Yul, but you can see there the Sons of Yul still managing to connect, and that is where the Rohirrim knights are at their deadly best, absolutely carving through that unit of Dunland veterans. Important gains being made here, but the Franadine nobles are here, albeit very depleted. They must have taken damage, because I did see them trying to charge through the Rohirrim lines earlier. They must have taken dreadful damage from the archers that Rohan had up on the cliffs. Rohan still have archers up there, I believe. Indeed they do, some hidden Helmingars. Be interested to see if the attackers remember that they're up there. Because obviously Eclipse could use them late on to surround the attackers, and the Helmingars are no pushovers in melee. You can see here the Melkor's Chosen coming forwards. I'm not sure whether the Melkor's Chosen would be able to... Yeah, they definitely wouldn't. Not against both of these two units, but they've certainly already cleaned up, rather. They're going to charge into the Melkor's Chosen here. They are. The red shields could turn around as well, and indeed they are as well. Melee cavalry, good melee cavalry, or are they? I think if they're going to win this fight against the Melkor's Chosen convincingly, they probably should, especially with the trolls on the way. Sons of Yul, they're really taking their life into their hands. The charge, fortunately for the Sons of Yul, doing most of the work there. Lance Knights such as themselves obviously do a huge amount of damage off the charge, but they didn't get out of that unscathed. They lost a few unit models there against the depleted Melkor's Chosen, again just flexing their muscles. Forward come some pikemen and Tarnostian spearmen from the Dol Amroth contingent as the Trolls of the White Hand continue to charge against the cavalry. They need to be careful though. If those Sons of Yul turn around and get their lances down, it could be pretty devastating for the Trolls of the White Hand. As it is, yeah, here they come, look. this could be a real problem for Isengard, because they will lose unit models here if they connect, and they do manage to kill off one troll. You know, it's maybe a little bit disappointing for the Sons of Yore. The way that the unit was organised certainly didn't help their case. The red shields are also certainly nowhere near as powerful off the charge, as you can see. Part of why the knights are so good is that armour-piercing charge they have. Trolls to White Hand, easily managing to weather the storm that the red shields were able to provide. Meanwhile, over here, Warg Skirmish is still around. It still says there's some fleeing units from Gondor, and indeed there is, but you can definitely see Mordor's army is certainly more damaged than the others of the attacking armies. The central two armies, of course, haven't lost a huge amount. The units they did lose, they sent with Mordor. Rudauer not looking quite so damaged after their engagement with the Rohirrim infantry. Again, partly due to positioning, also partly due to composition. Obviously, Gondor didn't bring any cavalry, so they were able to fully focus on their infantry. Rohan, despite bringing more of their better infantry, still ultimately focused on their cav here, which obviously made life a little bit more tricky when trying to deal with the onslaught of Rudauer. Doran Anil Archers starting to fire away at the attacks as they move forward. Half-Orc Spear Guard. There's some Dunland veterans as well as some Frandoline pikemen back there. You can see they're too good a shot to pass up, really. The Half-Orc Spear Guard, they do have their armour upgrade though. They do have a shield. They're not the most dangerous target in melee, so maybe there is better things that they could be focusing on, but it's better than not using the ammunition at all. Meanwhile, Half-Orc Spear Guard, actually that's exactly what they'll probably want. They do take a charge from the red shields, but ultimately nothing too problematic for them. They do take quite a few more losses from the Sons of Yore. Rohan here trying to just chip away at the manpower of the attackers as they move forward in conjunction with the archers from Dol Amroth up on the cliffside. Gondorians also have their marksmen in position. More of these Isengard spears taking damage on the way forward. The Dunland veterans, they have shields as well, but obviously, you know, neither of these two units have the most high quality shields, but the Dunland veterans also, they only have sort of very basic chainmail that they're wearing. Their armour is definitely not as good as the rest of the Isengard forces that they're marching alongside. And so they're going to be taking some pretty nasty damage there from Dol Amroth. More of a probing assault this than anything else. Not even sure I'd call it an assault, really. They're just sort of sat here biding their time, trying to gather their army together before making another genuine push. And this is where the defenders, in theory, should be at their strongest, because, I mean, this is effectively their final stand. They can go all the way back up to these encampments here at the top, but more or less they have surrendered both of the two villages, so I hope they manage to get all of the civilians out before that point. You can see here, primarily Gondor and Dol Amroth, with all of their infantry ready, obviously a lot of archers as well. That's going to be difficult for the attackers to deal with as well, like a lot of archers still. There's still some Rohirrim infantry as well, and of course, let's not forget the mighty Meduseld Guard. Their javelins could also prove to be very, very dangerous. Just one Parathil rider. The stakes, probably not the most important thing at this point in proceedings. I think there is still a unit of Misty Mountains Wargs riding around, and they are Warg skirmishers, but obviously that means they're probably going to be using their javelins. And in tight confines, like the rest of this match is probably going to be taking place in, cavalry becomes less important for the attackers. Squeezing it through can cause a bit of disarray, but it's also rather unlikely that you'll be able to do anything significant with it. Not impossible, but unlikely. Bit of a lull in proceedings here. There is a few... Again, it's not really worth... Like, the defenders are doing the right thing. It's not really worth trying to hold this village down like this. Sort of... That's not really a choke point, is it? This sort of... The gap between these two cliffs is certainly not worth trying to hold, because, again, it's far too wide. Trying to sort of go back within the village would put you at the mercy of the Orc Archers. You're surrendering the higher ground to them at that point in time. The absolute last thing you want to be doing. Some Riddermark Archers up on the side as well, so Rohan will be able to join in on the Archer Fest, which is going to commence at some point fairly soon, you would imagine. Uruk-hai infantry, just taking a stock of what the attackers have as well. So we have some Uruk-hai pikes, Rudauer swordsmen here at the back, some more Rudauer clansmen. Again, their armies still extend a long way back. Like some of their, some of their more serious units still haven't managed to march their way all the way up here. Actually, the Cave Troll Drummers are far too far away for my liking. They should be some of the first things near the front line, so that some of the lower tier Misty Mountains units don't immediately run for the hills. Doran Anil Archers under fire. Rudauer marksmen over on the hill, so this is going to provoke a response from the Doran Anil Archers, which are up here again. They can't just afford to sit here and take it. They need to use some of their ammunition up immediately. They're going to go. Well, they're going to go after the Guards of Orthanc, which is an interesting target. Really heavily armored, shielded, multiple HP. Probably not going to get the most kills against them. And I think there's a lot more tools that would be better against the Guards of Orthanc, including armor-piercing infantry and some javelins. Archers, like, again, unshielded units. As long as you're using your arrows on something useful, then that's fine. But again, the defenders can live or die by how many kills that their ranged units are actually able to get throughout the entirety of the battle, because they need to close that gap somehow. And I'm not sure whether they've really done it at this point. I mean, if we have a look, it is more or less the halfway point now. You can see here the defenders, yeah, they are behind. So, you know, they certainly haven't done it as of yet. They're going to need to rely on their artillery and their archers, I think, to do that. But of course it is going to be on the attackers. They need to be the ones to move forward. The onus is on them. And I feel as though the reason why they're not at the moment is just because their army's so stretched. I kind of feel as though Isengard and the Misty Mountains were caught a little bit flat-footed. Maybe flat-footed is the wrong word, but I think that they were kind of surprised by the speed at which Dol Amroth and Rohan suddenly abandoned these two front lines. But I mean, it was definitely the right thing to do, because Rudar would have came from behind and clattered Rohan. It would have taken Mordor a little bit longer to do the same to Dol Amroth, but they would have been able to do it as well. So, see here the Rudar marksmen just waiting. Uruk-hai archers again, nothing really too special in terms of the archers for the attackers here, but they will be able to put pressure on those defences. More to the point, they are chipping away at those units of Doran Ernil archers which are up on the cliffside. I think they're trying to get out of range, but I mean, it's kind of a futile gesture, this. Again, the Doran Ernil archers can have their armour upgraded, but the Dol Amroth player here elected not to. Not the wrong thing to do by any means, but I bet he's wishing that those archers did have their upgraded armour right about now. Would make them just that little bit stronger in this sort of situation. We'll go up to ×2 speed here while the attackers gather their courage for the big charge into this choke point. I think we'll start to get to the lay of the land in this battle pretty quickly when it starts. Some Ferranadine pikemen over there. So marshalling the presence of the Rohirrim cavalry, which is still way back over here. If the Sons of Yule get the opportunity, you can bet they're going to charge in, and even just 11 knights can still do a pretty substantial amount of damage. Certainly not the sort of thing the attackers can just afford to ignore. We shall see. Some ranged units firing back. Doran Ernil archers are firing. Not sure what at though. What are they firing at? Surely it's not the trolls. I swear this game is really starting to get on my nerves now. I was actually enjoying this replay at the start, and now I'm struggling to remain positive because of how badly the game is crashing at the moment. I really don't know what's happened. Again, this is a fairly detailed map, I suppose, with all the assets on it, but I don't know. It's only on the new maps as well, so it can't be my recording setup. I don't know. It's very, very frustrating at the moment. Again, I have limited time to record. You know, I'm trying to take what opportunities I can, but now when I see a new map, and well, it used to be when I saw a brand new map that was over 40k frames, I would be extremely excited to see what was happening. Now I'm just like, fucking hell, here we go again. It's going to take me about 6 hours to record this monstrosity. Well, let's see if we can get through this without yet another crash, shall we? It may have been the mangonel that caused it. I did notice there was another shot in the background over there, but with the effects and everything placed on absolute minimum, it really shouldn't be doing that. So, we have the Ettenwall Stroll Hunters who are going to immediately try and whittle down this Dol Amroth front line, the initial one made up of Tarnostian spearmen and Doran Ernil pikemen, and they will be reasonably successful in this. Dol Amroth probably won't be overly antagonised by the fact they're losing these units. They're not the most important units left in the defensive lineup, but they will still need a decent amount of bread and butter units that they can use to hold down the front line and prevent the attackers from simply washing over them, because they need to buy their skirmishers certainly a decent amount of time, and the elite units alone won't be enough to hold back the sheer numbers that the attackers still have at their disposal. You can see there they're actually rotating backwards now. There goes another hit from the mangonel. I'm now flinching every time I see one of them, because chances are it will cause the game to shit itself again. Rudar marksmen and Ettenwall Troll Hunters forming up. There you can see some Uruk-hai infantry getting ready to come forward. It'll be interesting to see actually how the defenders decide that they are going to set out their stall here. Looks like the Tarnostian spearmen are just still on the front line. They'll be the first line of defence. As you can see, the Isengard are now moving forward, while the Essenmoor Shoal Hunters and the Uruk-hai infantry together, it looks like they're going to be moving in. But the Tarnostian spearmen will need help to do this. The Essenmoor Shoal Hunters are decent in melee. The Uruk-hai infantry obviously far stronger as infantry combatants than the Tarnostian spearmen are, but with the support of these Dor and Ernil pikemen, they should be just fine. There's also the support of those Dor and Ernil archers up on the side there. Yet more of direct mangonel hit, causing a unit of unthreatened Dor and Ernil archers to rout. They will come back, of course, but it will give the attackers some respite now as they move forward. That's going to be less arrows that they need to deal with. Here comes Mordor, though, coming forward with Rudauer in support of this initial probing assault here from Isengard. You can see here the Riddermark archers have got a perfect shot, really. The defenders would probably want one of their stronger units of archers to be up here, but nonetheless the Riddermark archers will do their best to try and make a dent in the huge numbers advantage that the attackers currently hold. The defenders might need more men on the front line here. The Rudauer marksmen coming forward to try and join in the infantry assault, but they will immediately be skewered by a unit of Citadel Guard. In come the Black Swan Renegades as well, and the Fountain Guard, so they're certainly not pulling their punches here. The defenders now, they know, I think, how important this choke point could be, because as soon as this choke point ends, it opens up into a slightly wider area again. And honestly, the defenders are probably best in this position because they've got such a good field of fire that they can bring forth to the attackers. They're going to really want to try and hold down this position for as long as they possibly can. There you can see some Rudauer marksmen trying to get in position to shoot as well. The Ferojum Javelins also doing the same. With all of these armour-piercing units on the front line from both Gondor and Dol Amroth, a lot of these basic orcs are really going to struggle. Rudauer probably, well again, like the units are still nowhere near the same quality, but Rudauer won't be quite at the same level of doomed as the orcs are. Moran infantry and the like, of course, are not brilliant at the best of times, and they depend on their armour to keep them alive. Against units such as Black Swan Renegades, that is certainly not going to happen, even less so against Fountain Guard. Forward come Brandywine Pikemen, a direct hit there by the Gondorian catapult. So a good position the defenders are in, and this is where they could start to bring back some of that discrepancy that they built up. But the Ferojum Javelins are firing. Now might be a good time to try and utilise some of those archers to kill them off. Belfast Marines firing their javelins in from on high. And there they go. What are they going after? I think they are going after the Franadine Pikemen, which is not a bad idea. There's also some Mountain Uruk hosts now here from Mini 4 Ninja, as the Misty Mountains also tries to get a piece of the action here on this front line. There are the Nazgul. So I mean, the attackers, I think they know that if they can keep this level of assault up, the defenders will struggle. But the defenders can really start to break up these waves with the use of those catapults, or that catapult, and all of their archers. Ferojum Javelins trying to move forwards, get into a position to shoot right down the line, I would imagine. But the Citadel Guard, I think, seeing the danger, have now pushed forward to try and make that just a little bit more difficult. Here you can see the Franadine Pikemen getting absolutely pelted by javelins and archers. Although I would suggest the archers might be better off going after the Ferojum Javelins. They're multiple HP, but unshielded, not the best armour. In come another unit of Uruk-hai infantry, so these Citadel Guardsmen have definitely overextended themselves a bit, trying to stop those Ferojum Javelins getting into position, but I don't think they've really been all that successful. Catapult going long a little bit. They did at least hit the Rudauer marksman, but not really a great hit. When you consider the damage that catapults can really do, Ferojum Javelins are in position. Do they have a good hit there onto the pikes? Maybe, maybe not. Marks for the Karandros, I think, are opening up now, so the Rudauer player will need to make up his mind what he's going to be doing with these Ferojum Javelins pretty quickly, I'd say. Well, there goes the Rudauer general, I think. Maybe trying to take cover with his general, and unfortunately he ran into the Helmingas, and that is going to be the end of the Rudauer Knights. They were very depleted as it was, and they have ultimately discovered the Helmingas, but without their general, they may lose heart and flee. Forward comes Uruk-hai Pikemen now, and this is something the attackers will have to consider how to deal with. They could overwhelm the Helmingas with a big force easily, but do they really want to siphon off a huge force when their assault is already underway? Interesting conundrum for them to have to deal with. Orc Javelin's already shaken. There are the Tirathea marksmen now. The Belfast Marines out of ammunition. You can see here this assault has gone really poorly, actually, and a large part of that is almost certainly due to the Athelian Rangers of Gondor up on this hill. They have absolutely perfect vantage point. They just started to hide again. Typical. An absolutely perfect vantage point, scything through the ranks of the attackers. Forward comes another unit of marksmen of Ker Andros. Ravenhelms are also there, guards of Osgiliath. Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan as well. So yes, still a fair amount of reinforcements here. The defenders can move forward, but certainly the attackers need to keep this assault going, I think. It's been punishing for them, but I think they need to. They've already committed so much here, they need to keep it going. The Reforged Javelins as well, they've also dealt some pretty significant damage in and of themselves to the defensive infantry, and if they can keep doing that, then it will definitely be a worthwhile venture to just try and keep pushing forwards. They're still able to fire as well. This unit of Uruk-hai infantry giving them just enough cover to make sure that these Gondorians don't get right up in their face and stop them from firing. They must be running low on ammunition now though, the Reforged Javelins, and you can see there that some of them have got their clubs out now. And they're pretty decent in melee against units like the Gondorians. Obviously AP, not as impressive as the Enslavers in melee for Rudauer certainly, but it's the same sort of thing. Multiple HP shock infantry. There you can see the Helmingast have decided to come down the hill to try and make a bit of a fight of it. The Walk Skirmishers, I think they were trying to just pepper them down with javelin fire. These Helmingast actually still have ammunition, which is a pretty key factor. They'll be able to shoot at point blank into these Walk Skirmishers and maybe rout them. That'll be a big get for nothing but a bunch of Helmingast that are isolated. Now though, Rudauer and Isengard sending over a couple of clutches of pikemen to try and deal with this pocket of Rohan resistance, and the Helmingast, they're kind of the closest thing Rohan have to a unit like the Bardian Marksman or Balaketh Marksman. Like, they're not terrible in melee, but against like really decent pikes like this, they shouldn't really have too many issues in clearing away the Rohirrim resistance. These red shields are still just hanging around as well, but they're getting pelted with javelins from the Walk Skirmishers, still taking some damage from those archers on the hill though. There's also the Sons of Yule, which have also been committed forward. Maybe a little bit early here, and there you can see immediately taking a shower of axes from the Trollshore axe throwers. And I think this sort of Rohan trying to sort of get in behind the attacks and do some damage. I think maybe all of this was sprung a little bit soon. And again, I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Rudauer were able to sort of stumble across the Helmingast, and so Eclipse's plans were pushed forward a little bit. There you can see the red shields, again, just taking axes in the back, and all of them falling, very depleted already, of course. So he had to sort of launch his ambush earlier than he wanted, and ultimately his men ended up getting ripped apart because of it. And you can see here the advantage that Isengard hold in melee. The Trolls of the White Hand are going to be able to smash the Helmingast into submission, and the Pikes are going to be able to do the same to the other unit. So unfortunately not too successful there for a Rohirrim ambush, but let's see what's going on the front line. You can see here the Rudauer marksmen in place, covered by their shields as well, or the spears I should say, so they're going to be able to shoot right down the line. And this is a problem. I mean, the attackers, I think, despite taking a pretty hefty amount of damage, all things considered, have done a very good job here of pushing the defenders back and forcing them to commit more and more men that are getting lost. Here you can see the Athenian Rangers doing their thing though, and this is the problem. Like, the attackers, as they continue to push forward, are going to be taking a lot of damage all the time they're doing it. The question is whether they have enough manpower to sustain this assault until the end of the battle, or whether units like the Athenian Rangers just deal too much damage. Even the Riddermark Archers are probably absolutely cleaning up in terms of kills here. Moranon Archers being forced to push forward. Temple Guard are now in here as well, so they may have already used up their ammunition, which should be interesting. There are the Wanderers of Nimrodel as well, so they're pincered between two units of Rangers, the Athelian Rangers and the Wanderers of Nimrodel. And that's going to be enough to basically stop this assault completely, unless the attackers are willing to send forward another wave. But are they ready to send forward another wave? Maybe that Rohirrim ambush did just sort of muck up their momentum a little bit, the attackers, and maybe that could be key. Just another Mountaineer at coast pushing forward another unit of depleted pikes. A lot of these units are a little bit far away from my liking though. Just a single unit of Mountaineer at coast isn't really going to be enough to keep that attack going for too much longer. These pikes are doing their thing as well. Like, they don't need this many units over here anymore to deal with the Helmingasts. Like, the Trolls on their own should be enough to deal with. Or I say that, the Helmingasts actually holding their own. The Trolls have been in melee before, of course, against like Fountain Guard, so it's maybe not too surprising. They're a little bit thin on the ground, but these Helmingasts bravely killing off the Trolls of the White Hand, proving my point rather that they are decent in melee. Again, the Trolls were largely depleted and had used up their hit points here, but I think seeing this, the Uruk-hai Pike's going to have to double back and finish them off. But Rohan, a real thorn in the side of the attackers' plans here, so while it may not have been ideal, still worked out. Meanwhile, that Mangonel, I think they were trying to go after the Tirithea marksman there, but they only succeeded in hitting their own men. The Trollshore Axe Throwers is the last unit that the attackers want to be using cheaply. I'm reluctant to zoom in on these fights over here because I get the feeling it will just crash again, but sod it, I'm going to take my life into my hands here. Ferocium Javelins, Minas Morgul Chosen. You can see the level of damage here that the attackers have taken on the push forwards, and the defenders now have got things under control once again. There are Black Swans here. The Raven Helms are broken at the hands of the Mountain Uruk host, overextending a little bit, but it is forcing the attackers to just, it's not a unified assault as of yet. In comes some Rudar Clansmen, some Trollshaw Axeros are going to try and get into position to do some damage. They would be ideal against what remains of the Guards of Osgiliath. To be fair, the defenders have also taken an awful lot of damage in this defence. Another unit of pikes has formed up another line. I think, was that friendly fire from the Trollshaw Axe Throwers that killed them, or was it one of the Mace Men that crushed the skull of the Mordor General? Although I guess a Ring Wraith doesn't really have a skull as such. In comes some Javelins into the Rudar Clansmen, the Pelagia Marines now, the Gondorian Javelins doing their bit. I think the Belfast Marines right next to them as well. They still have ammunition? They do. Still the Tirithea Marksmen doing a lot of damage. I'd be really interested to see the level of kills that the archers for the defenders have got here, because surely that's where the lion's share of their kills have come from. The Javelins probably haven't done too badly either. But yeah, this is a real problem actually for the defenders. The Trollshaw Axe Throwers, they will absolutely love firing into Dorinan or Pikemen. Those units going to be able to inflict a pretty hefty toll on the defenders here. And again, this is the key. Can the attackers break the defenders before they lose too many men to the archers? There are the Franadine Rangers, who they also will have certainly played their part. The defenders certainly have, their Rangers have already done a huge amount of damage to the attackers, but the same can be true the other way around. If you're the attackers and you can use a unit of Rangers into a defensive blob, that is a huge victory you can potentially win for your team. I think this is the end now of the Helmingas. Yeah, there they are. Only 6 of them remaining. They didn't quite finish off all the trolls to the right hand. The pikes managed to get there and support them just in time, but a brave effort, and it did sort of prevent those units from getting into position as quickly as they would have wanted. Catapult managing to get a direct hit there into the Uruk-hai crossman, another really dangerous tool that Isengard can bring, of course, those crossbows. I'd be really surprised if the Misty Mountains didn't have a couple of units of heavy goblin crossbows as well. They're bringing forward their archers to put some more pressure on the defenders at this stage. Still some Nazkai as well. Mountain Uruk hosts, who are decent, as I said, very good for what they cost. Heavy goblin spears. There's still that Mangonel, which is certainly something that I want to avoid looking at directly if I can when it fires, because apparently it's too much for a map like this. And again, I think in the Mangonel, in conjunction with how detailed and complex the map is causing problems. The Franadine Rangers, meanwhile, getting chased off by a unit of Pelagia Marines. Pelagia Marines, of course, could get hunted down by these wargs if they're not careful. Franadine Pikemen are now also routing off. Wanderers of Nimrodel continuing to fire now. Eastmark Spearmen in position. Again, I'm not really too convinced by this front line anymore. Tirithea Marksmen being sent forward to try and hold on to it for as long as possible. There are Perithil champions there. And with the Ranger fire and with those catapult volleys as well, perhaps the fear from the Perithil champions will be enough to cause a lot of routing here. There goes the Goblin Archers. Belfast Marines also coming forward. There are these dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan. Their encouragement effect also coming into play, inspiring what little of these defenders remain to try and hold their ground for as long as they possibly can. Tirithea Marksmen now marching away from the front line. There's still the Medicel Guard. There's still elites back here as well, let's not forget. Westmark units, Nimlothian Honour Guard, more dismounted Silver Swan Knights, and the Haven Guard. That Gondorian catapult has probably done a huge amount of damage to the attacks as well. Whether it's going to be enough remains to be seen. Again, the defenders are extremely reliant here on doing their damage from afar. Mountain Orc Berserkers may be overextending too much though and immediately coming under arrow fire, and they, of course, they don't really have armour as such. So definitely a very good target for all these archers to make a beeline for. Javelins trying to do their thing. The Riddermark Archers, however, are going to stop the advance of the Berserkers before they can engage the Belfast Marines, I think. Throwing themselves in the way. Obviously, certainly not brilliant in melee by any means. But they will at least do their bit. Guards of Orthanc on the front line now as well. A very tough unit of Isengard Spears, of course. Uruk-hai Archers trying to get into position, as well as the Uruk-hai Crossmen. How long can the defenders continue to hold this choke point for is the question. I'm not so sure. Tirithea Marksmen still there. Wanderers of Nimrodel pulling out their swords at this point, charging in. Mountain Orc Berserkers at this point. The damage they've taken from range and continue to take at range is just far too much. So they're getting picked apart. Haven Guard and Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan coming down. So Dol Amroth, I think, is eager to just commit their whole army down here and give their lives in defence of the encampment at the top. Gondor and Rohan will still have the ability to defend the hill up. We're into the final 10k frames at this point, so maybe all or nothing here for the attackers. Another, well, I was about to say another direct hit. It looked like it was going to be, but unfortunately for the defenders it missed. The Uruk-hai crossbows will be able to get a couple more volleys off before they are ultimately engaged by the Wanderers of Nimrodel. It's not good for the Uruk-hai crossbows. Rangers, by no means are they great in melee, but their defensive skill means that they can be really annoying in melee. They can be difficult to get rid of. Meanwhile, these Pelargir Marines, given the run around by the Rangers and ultimately engaged by the Trolls of the White Hand, you can see actually the difference between the Helmingast and the Pelargir Marines here in melee. I said that. The Pelargir Marines should still win this, really. Rather like the Helmingast, they're not terrible in melee, but it's definitely not their strong suit. I wouldn't go so far as to call them a hybrid unit with line infantry. Put it that way. Same sort of thing with the Helmingast, I think. Meanwhile, these Wanderers of Nimrodel taking direct hits from the Uruk-hai Archers, and of course Rangers, not the best armour, so they're falling in droves. But here comes another big wave. The Orcs of the Misty Mountains flooding forwards. A lot of heavy Goblin Spears here. More Mountain Uruk Coast, as well as a few units from Isengard like Uruk-hai Pikes and some Snaga. This is again a big committal of resources. Can the defenders continue to hold on? This armour piercing will come in handy against Dol Amroth, who are pretty much alone defending this lower ground at this point. The Haven Guard are here. Not sure whether that's going to be enough. And there's Goblin Archers in melee. It will definitely be enough to just kill them all day long. Still, these Mountain Orc Berserkers in behind the lines and fighting hard. Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan, I think, seeing that the cause on the front line is lost and maybe are going to retreat back up to the higher level again. Try and give Gondor a bit of a hand. The Haven Guard also, I think, seeing that that is the case, they're going to have to leave a rear guard here of Tirithea Marksmen, and of course the units that were already on the front line. Even with the inspiration, the Dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan are shaken. Riddermark Archers still there. Are they going to charge in, or are they going to retreat as well? Every man counts. If they can save them, and they don't need them on the front line, then they probably should. Back goes the rest of the Dol Amroth forces. What about the Pelargir Marines? How are they doing? How are they doing? Where'd they go? Well, they might have got charged by the wargs, I suppose. They should all be dead, though. Oh, well, there's a lot of their corpses out here. I guess we know what happened to them now. Archers and Snaga happened to them. Granadine Rangers also probably turned around. That's a huge force of goblins, though, at this point. So I would suggest that it's going to be primarily goblins here in the late game that are going to be laying siege to the final layer. Forward comes Froggy with some of his. There's some heavy goblin crossbows. This is the issue. The attackers still have units like crossbows that they can utilise here in the late game, which is going to make life pretty difficult, I think, for the defenders. They're going to have to choose a position to engage which doesn't allow the attackers to use their crossbows, and then they're going to have to rely on quality. Because in terms of quality, they definitely have what it takes, I think. They've got Medicel Guard, they've still got their Midlothian Honor Guard, they've got their Silver Swan Knights, Haven Guard, the Westmark units are still here in force. A few units which are not quite so good, like the Riddermark Archers and Eastmark Spears, but every man is going to count here in the late game if the defenders are going to see themselves over the line here. It hasn't crashed again, amazingly. Touch wood. It's a miracle. Goblin Archers, I mean, they're still there. They're still up for another fight in melee, which is impressive in and of itself. And again, I do think the issue here for the attackers is just one of quality in melee. Do they really have it? They've got their Nazkai, Blackbacks, and some beaten up guards of Orthanc. The Nazgul are still alive, amazingly, which, considering how long they've been in melee, is very impressive, but only 4 of them, which indicates how weak they currently are. There's the Nazkai. Yeah, it's kind of role reversal here, because I think now the attackers are going to be reliant on their range to win them this fight. And the defenders are going to have to get down and dirty in melee as much as they possibly can. The Medicel Guard are going to move forward here. Quite why, I'm not sure. They surely still have ammunition, and they're going to find themselves just engaged immediately by heavy gob spears. What are they trying to do? They're reloading. No, they're going to be engaged in melee. I really don't know what Eclipse was hoping to accomplish there, to be honest. They were always just going to get engaged. I mean, Heavy Goblins just pushing, single filing into the line there. Being given a gift, really. Able to launch a volley into the blackbacks, but the multiple HP meaning only one drops. And Lothian Honor Guard just sort of biding their time and waiting. So this is the final engagement now. Rohan flooding forward to make up the bulk of this front line. Rohan and the Misty Mountains, the ones who are primarily here at this point in time. Dole Amroth coming forward, they're dismounted. Silver Swan Knights, Westmark Infantry coming forward. Here comes the Gondorians just pushing their catapult in. I'd assume the catapult's out of ammunition and they're just pushing it in to try and make life a little bit more difficult for the attackers moving forward. Try and make it so the attackers don't have a unified assault. In come the Cave Troll Drummers, which of course will mean the attackers won't break quite so easily. They are going to get engaged in melee almost immediately though. The Franadine Rangers are trying to shoot right down the line, which I don't know if they have the perfect angle, but they certainly will be able to get some damage done. Lothian Honor Guard are in. Medicel Guard, their Javelin Fire is going to be instrumental here. They're going to need to do a lot of damage to at least one of the elite units, and then they themselves are going to have to get down and dirty in melee as well. In come the Haven Guard. Athelian Rangers still. I mean, they're going to need to go out there and deal with the Franadine Rangers. I think the Rangers should be fast moving enough across the ground that they should make it in time before they're picked apart by the Rangers from Rudour. Medicel Guard now moving into melee. Here you can see the Heavy Goblin Spears really struggling here, which is unsurprising. There's a lot of AP between the Nimlothian Honor Guard and the Westmark Marshals in here, which is going to be really nasty for pretty much all the attackers to deal with at this point. Only the Blackbacks can really claim. Well, there's also the crossbows though, which is the real problem. The Heavy Goblin crossbows, if they get into a good position where they can shoot, it's going to be real difficult. The Guards of Orthanc trying to sort of filter around the lines. The Medicel Guard trying to get into a position where they can shoot once again. The Haven Guard are just sort of hunting down the Franadine Rangers. I would leave that to the Athelian Rangers though. The Haven Guard are overextending far too much. And I mean, at this point, they kind of have to deal with this. They kind of just have to. They've made their bed, now they have to lie in it, so to speak, because they can catch these crossbows out and they could kill them. But the problem the Haven Guard have is they're going to be surrounded here. The pikes are going to come out over here, but this will force the attackers to split their assault a little bit. And over here, the attackers are going to need far more on the front line. These the Mountaineer Coast are getting absolutely dominated in melee now by the Men of the Mark and the Knights from the south. Yeah, and those crossbows are just trying to run away along with the Rangers. So you can see the attackers are certainly not blind to the fact that if they can use their range tools here, they stand a much better chance. But here the Haven Guard find themselves far too deep into enemy territory. The archers aren't the problem. A combination of the pikes and the blackback berserkers are a major problem, however, for Imrahil and his most elite forces. Back over here, we have some Westmark infantry. As they continue to push forward here, the defenders, and I think it is going to have to be that way. I mean, you can see they're a huge rout, really. Heavy Goblin Spears, and if the defenders are going to win, it will have to be that way because the numbers discrepancy is still large. There goes Imrahil. Unfortunate loss. He chased the enemy a little bit too far. You could say there wasn't really a choice though. The Rangers and the crossbows would have got into a side position and then it genuinely would have been all over for the defenders. They need to continue to chase backwards, and here the Misty Mountains might be in a bit of trouble here because they don't have the manpower on the front line to cover their crossbows anymore. And all of a sudden that Nazkai, it needs to be far closer to the front line. They need units. The spears are returning, but the Heavy Goblin Spears may not get there in time to save the Heavy Goblin crossbows, and that is how the Misty Mountains would win this fight. They immediately rout. They may very well come back as well though. There, the Westmark Marshals having to deal with the Blackbacks. That's not ideal for them. They need to stop these crossbows from firing, and the Westmark Marshals continuing to charge forward. This is going to be nasty with Heavy Goblin crossbows. Definitely not the sort of unit they want to be going toe-to-toe with at close range. Not the best charge, but it doesn't really matter. The Heavy Goblin crossbows are bad in melee, very bad. And now the Dismounted Knights, the Silver Swan, continuing to move forward. Eastmark Spears, getting in the way of all of these returning units. Okay, so let's see if this time we can drag ourselves battered and bruised over the finish line, as I was zoomed in over there when a mangonel shot hit and rather predictably the game immediately crashed. So, HRE Mini 4 Ninja has sort of remembered that he does have another mangonel, it seems, as this one was pushed up right from the back. That was the worst time it could crash as well. We're so close to the end, so I had to go through the entire battle again on ×6 speed. So this Mangonel at this point, it could be the difference between victory and defeat, and I'd love to be over there getting close-up shots of it, but with how unstable the game is at the moment, I'm simply not able to. And you can see there that immediately the Rohirrim forces, even the more elite Rohirrim forces, are looking like routing. And that could be the difference in victory and defeat here, because they were able to get into those skirmishes as we just saw, and the heavy goblin crossbows also are in there, in and amongst the Mangonel shots. They could also start routing off, to be fair. A lot of these heavy goblin spears are also coming back, let's not forget, but if they lose too much of their manpower here in melee, the defenders, it will come down to a case of it just being the Nimlothian Honour Guard against. So here we are at the end after, of course, yet another crash, and actually this is a day later, and even a day later with a few presumed fixes to try and make this a little bit better, there was still another crash at the same point. This has been by far and away my least pleasant replay experience with Third Age Reforged, and to be honest with you, it does have me kind of reconsidering my position a little bit with doing the battles that I have as often as I have, and sort of I've managed to keep up the old schedule that I had up until now, but honestly this has left me wondering if that's a wise course of action, to be honest with you, because I effectively give up my weekends to try and maintain my channel at the current level that it is, and for the sake of people making maps where they sort of hold their finger down on the brush tool that adds bushes to their maps for 10 seconds longer than they should for every part of the map they put bushes on, it's really disheartening, honestly. It really has left me feeling very bummed out, honestly, because obviously people do put a lot of time into these maps, but honestly a little bit more care and attention needs to be made if people want me to show them. And to be honest with you, I'm not really all that important, to be honest with you. People can make whatever maps they want, and to be honest with you, whether I can show them or not is not really going to factor in to most people's thinking when they create their map. So to be honest with you, this is just a thing that's going to affect me. And to be fair, this map probably was the perfect storm in many ways. There was a player that apparently desynced during the battle. There was also, siege equipment in the form of mangonels, which are a little bit more unproven and untested in comparison to stuff like the trebuchets and the catapults. Even if they haven't really caused problems before in this map, they most certainly did. Yeah, obviously it does only seem to be the new map, so the map itself is going to shoulder a great deal of the blame for how unstable this experience was. And then of course there's the shaders, which is one of the reasons why it's primarily just my problem here. Adding these shaders on obviously does tax the game a lot, and to be honest with you, Medieval 2 is breaking at this point. This is beyond the limit of what I think Medieval 2 can handle. So if people continue to make things more complicated and make things, past this level of detail, I'm just not going to be able to show them. And honestly, I think the next recording session I have, I will record as normal, and I will use some of the new maps that people have given me as well. If these crashing problems persist, I think I'm going to be re-evaluating my current position with regards to what I'm doing, and that's kind of a necessity, to be honest with you. I do not have the free time nor the will, to be honest with you, to spend an extra 4 hours on every replay just because someone added too many trees or too many buildings or too many new assets to their map. It's up to them what they add to their map, of course, but it's also up to me what I can and cannot show. And to be honest with you, this has left me with a very sour taste in my mouth. We'll see. I mean, it's a bad day for me, honestly. A bad couple of days, honestly. There is a fix that I added, but honestly, that seemed to make very little difference, to be honest with you. It just seemed, it crashed in exactly the same point again. And like I said, it could just be that, there was a player that desynced, a lot of siege equipment, newer map as well, so that obviously adds to the taxing nature of this battle. I don't know. I really don't know. It's been a most unpleasant experience. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's a couple of other new maps that I can do, including the updated version of the Witch King's Sanctum, which I think will be the ultimate litmus test, to be honest with you, of what is what, because when I tried that map last time, it was just as bad, if not worse, than this one because of how super detailed it was. If there's a bunch more crashes on that, I think I will be drastically scaling back the amount of Reforged content I do, because I cannot put up with this. It is absolutely enraging, to be honest with you, that this is what it's come down to. So yeah, I mean, I hope you enjoyed this match, because it was actually a pretty decent one for what we could actually see of it. And from your perspective, of course, the cuts will happen as they will, and they'll just phase back in instantly. For me, this has been over the course of 2 entire days, So let's see what did the damage here for Rohan. Eclipse, of course, the player whose replay this was from the perspective of. We have the Red Shields and the Sons of Yore, and his cavalry in general doing a pretty decent job. His Riddermark Archers up on that hill, of course, also reaping a very heavy toll on the enemy, and even the Westmark Infantry also doing a pretty good job. The Shield Maidens and Helmingast doing okay, one of the units of Shield Maidens in particular nearly cracking 200 kills. Medicel Guard, but of course it wasn't too surprising in the end to know. I haven't even said who won yet. The attackers ended up winning. Not too surprising though, because they did have the elites to go toe-to-toe with what the defenders had left at the end, and they of course in conjunction with that had the support of a mangonel and the support of some crossbows as well. So that was always going to be the difference maker in this particular battle. The Misty Mountains player was the player who desynced though, which is probably a big contributor as well, because of course he was the one in command of the mangonels, which almost certainly didn't help matters. But also what slightly worries me is the fact that some other people played this replay and had no real issues with it, which makes me believe that the shaders are at fault, and to be quite frank, I don't really see why I should drastically lower the quality of my videos just because someone has added too much detail to their maps, and I'm sounding a little bit overly hostile here, I think, but at the end of the day, like, I'm putting hours and hours of my time into this, just the same as the people who made these maps, and it is bad. The new maps have been bad for crashing. Yeah, regardless, I'm pretty bummed out, but like I said, I hope you enjoyed this battle, and I do hope you'll join me for whatever is next, and I do hope it will prove to be better than this.